there, welcome everyone to another video. If you are a new viewer, welcome. I appreciate you so much. If you are a returning viewer who has not subscribed, I appreciate you too. And to my subscribers, I have a special love for you. Thank you for your support. We have covered the present tense so far. We've also covered the past tense. We've covered the future tense. And today, I'm very happy to present to you the present continuous in Spanish. Okay. Now, before we talk about the use, let me just establish that we use this tense in English all the time. So for example, if I asked you to look at the picture and tell me what Michelle Obama is doing, then your response would be, duh, she's exercising, right? Or if I asked you to look at the other picture and say, what is Taylor Swift doing? You would say she is singing, she is performing, okay? Those are examples of the present continuous tense. In English, we form it by using the present tense of the verb to be plus the present participle. And in Spanish, guess what? It is formed in the very same way. We use the present continuous tense in Spanish to talk about actions that are occurring in a continuous or progressive manner, all right? And at the moment of speaking, especially. Formation. We use the present tense of the verb estar. There are two verbs in Spanish that mean to be, ser and estar. I have another video on the difference between ser and estar. So if you have not seen that, go watch it. It's very important because knowing those two verbs alone can help you to create thousands of sentences in Spanish. So we use the present tense of the verb estar plus the present participle. All right. So let's look at estar in the present tense. We have yo estoy, I am. Tú estás, you are. Él, ella, está, he or she is. Usted está, you polite are. Nosotros estamos, we are. Vosotros estáis, you all are, the Spain version. And then we have ellos, ellas están, they are. Or ustedes están, you all are. Okay, so yo estoy, tú estás, él, ella, usted está, nosotros estamos, vosotros estáis, ellos, ellas, ustedes están. And notice that there are accents on the to form, the él, ella, usted form, the vosotros form, and the ellos, ellas, and ustedes form. So again, to form the present continuous, we use the present tense of the verb estar plus the present participle, which is what we are about to attack right now. Okay, so the present participle of ER and IR verbs is formed by removing the ER or IR ending and adding yendo. Okay, there are three types of verbs in Spanish. You have AR verbs, IR verbs, and ER verbs. All verbs will end with one of those endings. So if it is an ER or IR verb, we're going to take off the ending and add yendo. If it is an AR verb, however, we're going to remove the AR and add ando. Okay, so again, for ER and IR verbs, we add yendo. And for AR verbs, we add ando. Let's look at some examples. The verb escuchar means to listen. When you take off the AR and add ando, you end up with escuchando. Escuchando. The verb vivir is to live, and it is an IR verb. So we take off the IR and we add yendo. We end up with viviendo. For comer, we end up with comiendo. Bailar, bailando. Asistir, which means to attend, not to assist, we end up with asistiendo. And ver, to see, we end up with viendo. All right, so you're doing very well so far. I hope you're taking notes because learning Spanish effectively is a very active and intentional process, not one that is characterized by passivity. So if you're not taking notes, please go ahead and do so that you can look back at it later and keep progressing in your learning of the language. Okay. So let's now put it all together. Remember that the formula is the present tense of estar plus the present participle that is formed by taking off the ending and adding ando if it's an AR verb, or yendo if it's an IR or ER verb. So here are some examples, unos ejemplos. Número uno dice, yo estoy enseñando una lección. That's what I'm doing at this very moment. I am teaching a lesson. Estoy enseñando una lección. All right. And remember that the subject pronouns in Spanish are optional once the reader or the listener knows to whom you're referring. So I could either say, yo estoy enseñando una lección, or I could say, estoy enseñando una lección. All right. Número dos dice, mi hermano está participando en el concierto. My brother is participating in the concert. Número tres, no están jugando al football. They are not playing football. All right. Football. So with sports in Spanish, you will typically see the personal a accompanying the verb jugar. So they say jugar al tenis, jugar al baloncesto, jugar al football, etc. All right. And then in number 4, it says, ¿Qué estás haciendo? Now, very important. Spanish speakers may ask you, ¿Qué estás haciendo? Which literally means, what are you doing? Or they may ask you, ¿Qué haces? Which is actually the present tense. That is because the present indicative is frequently used where we English speakers would use the present continuous tense. So the present indicative, the simple present, is used more commonly in Spanish than the present continuous tense. So don't be alarmed if you hear Spanish speakers asking you questions about what you're doing at the moment and they use the present tense. Nevertheless, it's very important for us to know how to form the present continuous tense. Okay? All right. Now let's talk a little bit about reflexive verbs. These can be something of a challenge, and reflexive verbs end with se. For example, acostarse, levantarse, vestirse. Here we have the verb bañarse, which means to bathe. So with reflexive verbs, we have to put me, te, se, nos, os, and se before the verb under normal circumstances. But with the present continuous tense, we can either put those reflexive additions before the verb or after the verb. All right. So in the case of bañarse, I would end up with yo me estoy bañando. Or I could also say estoy bañándome. All right. So yo me estoy bañando. I am bathing. Tú te estás bañando. Él, ella, usted se está bañando. Nosotros nos estamos bañando. Vosotros os estáis bañando. O ellos, ellas, ustedes se están bañando. Or you can put the reflexive ending after the verb. So you can say, estás bañándote, for example. Or ella está bañándose. All right. So that's for reflexive verbs. Now, of course, Spanish would not be Spanish without a bunch of irregularities. And the first group we're looking at is a group of verbs in which the E changes to an I. So the present participle is actually irregular. And those verbs include decir, to say or tell, servir, to serve, pedir, to ask for, sentir, to feel, seguir, to follow, mentir, to lie, medir, to measure, hervir, to boil, and elegir, to choose or to select. So the present participle of decir would be diciendo, because we first changed the E in decir to an I, then we take off the IR, and then we add yendo. So from decir, we end up with diciendo. So if you wish to ask the question, what is your mom saying? You would say, ¿Qué está diciendo tu mamá? ¿Qué está diciendo? From servir, we end up with sirviendo for the same reason. Pedir, pidiendo, sentir, sintiendo, seguir, siguiendo, mentir, mintiendo, medir, midiendo, hervir, hirviendo, elegir, eligiendo. All right. And then we have another group in which the O in the verb changes to you. So in that group, we have verbs like dormir, to sleep, and morir, to die. So the present participle of dormir is durmiendo. The O changes to you. Then we take off the IR and we add yendo. So durmiendo. So right now, when you look at the screen, you see a picture of my cat. ¿Qué está haciendo? Él está durmiendo. And then morir, which means to die, the same thing happens. The O changes to a U and we end up with muriendo. Okay? All right. And the last category we're going to be looking at today is the category in which there is a Y instead of an I for verbs that end in a vowel once you take off the ER or IR. Okay, so in ir, it's only 2 letters. You can only take off the R and then you're left with an I. And so the present participle of ir is yendo. For construir, when you take off the IR, you are left with a U at the end. And so once there is a vowel before the IR or the ER, then you're going to use a Y instead of an I. The present participle of traer is trayendo. And for oír, the present participle is oyendo. All right. So these verbs use a Y instead of an I because they have a vowel before ER or IR. Okay. The present participle of ir is yendo. Construir, construyendo. Traer, trayendo. And oír, which means to hear, oyendo. All right. So now we have a passage that demonstrates the present continuous in use. It's always good to see authentic usage of the tense we are covering. All right. Y dice, en este momento estoy escribiendo un párrafo en español mientras escucho música en mi habitación. Afuera, los pájaros están cantando y el viento está moviendo las hojas de los árboles. Mis amigos están enviando mensajes en el grupo de chat y yo les estoy respondiendo poco a poco. And that expression poco a poco means little by little. Write it down. Mientras tanto, mi hermano está cocinando la cena y mi perro está durmiendo en el sofá. Todos estamos disfrutando de una tarde tranquila en casa. All right. So we see the first person being used. Estoy escribiendo. I am writing. We see the third person plural being used. Los pájaros están cantando. We see the third person singular being used. El viento está moviendo. The wind is moving. All right. And therefore, it's good for us to look for examples of the tense we are trying to master. Okay. I hope that was useful to you. Thank you all for your attention. Please let me know if you have any questions in the chat or any doubts you would like for me to clarify, and I will gladly respond. All right. Thank you so much, and I will see you in the next video.